Welcome on board the RichPlanet starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall. In tonight's show, we will be discussing a very disturbing phenomenon, that of animal mutilation, and the controversial subject of human mutilation. The show was recorded in March 2010 and was the first starship show produced, so there are one or two technical problems, mainly the fact that one of the cameras wasn't working. Nevertheless, this hopefully will not detract too much from the show. We believe from evidence which has been uncovered over the last decade that there has been a government cover-up from the highest levels on this issue for quite some time. DEFRA, that's the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, have an efficient strategy in place involving the monitoring of vets, farms and members of the public. We believe from information given to us by witnesses that DEFRA have agents within animal health positions throughout the country who have a secret dual role unbeknown to the local authorities and vets. These agents are used to report any suspected animal mutilation cases to a central DEFRA-controlled outfit. DEFRA agents then swiftly remove any evidence before it can be examined by independent researchers. Throughout this show, we will be screening some images of mutilated animals and some of a human being. If you are sensitive to this kind of thing, please switch off now. We realize that this show is sometimes broadcast when people are eating their breakfast. We recommend that these people hurry up and finish your cornflakes to avoid any trepidation. Having said that, we have limited the selection of images to a mere fraction of those in our possession and chosen just a few to demonstrate important aspects of the phenomenon. Just in the last few weeks, there have been cases of mutilated seals turning up on the shores of the UK. Since late 2008, a total of 52 mutilated seals have been found along the east coast from St Andrews Bay in Scotland down to the North Norfolk coast. The injuries on some of the seals is bizarre to say the least. Some have had corkscrew-shaped deep cuts along the length of their bodies. The consensus of opinion among experts, including Dr. Dave Thompson of the Sea Mammals Research Unit, is that boat propellers are not the cause of the injuries, as there has been no bone damage. Also, seals are shy creatures, and it is rare for them to be killed by boat propellers, certainly not in such high numbers. The cuts start at the left side of the lower chin and work rearwards with a peeling action. Considerable cutting force is applied without interruption. Seal blubber is very tough, and the cuts were made with no jagged edges or breaks. An RSPCA vet in Norfolk has done post-mortems on 12 seals, and one post-mortem has been done by the VLA in Bury St Edmunds. The RSPCA vet said the cuts looked like they had been caused by some kind of machinery with great force, and also that the seals were in perfect health before the mutilation wounds were inflicted. So far, the authorities are baffled and do not have an explanation. I hope to bring you a report on these cases in the near future as more information is uncovered. In tonight's show, I talk to David Cayton about the bizarre mystery of animal mutilation. David was a photographer in the RAF for 10 years, then worked for British Aerospace for 28 years, rising to become the head of the non-destructive testing division. Since retiring, he has spent 13 years investigating strange animal deaths and spoke to me on the Starship in March about his research. Well, it's good to have you back on board the ship, David.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Okay.
It's good to be beamed up again.
Good.
I'm enjoying it more this time. I got a bit vertigo last time.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'll have to have a word with the technicians then. Okay, so you've come along today, David, to talk about the animal mutilation phenomenon. Yeah. And viewers may already know about the film Silent Killers that we made in May 2009.
I do hope so.
An hour-long documentary which charts a lot of David's and members of the APFU's work into the very strange animal mutilation phenomenon. Yes. Yeah. And I mentioned the APFU there, David. Would you like to just tell us a bit about the APFU? What does that stand for and what's it all about?
Well, it's a name that one of the members, Phil Hoyle, actually coined. We had kicked some ideas around. There was 3 or 4 of us, no, 5 originally, people we got together after I'd been looking at the mutes on my own for 3 or 4 years, and got Phil interested because he'd seen something in UFO magazine, Quest UFO magazine, and we decided to pool our efforts, and Phil saw connections with the work he was doing with abductions possibly. So he decided his best name was Animal Pathology Field Unit, and we chose that because of the pathology umbrella, because we had I had a professor of pathology in Manchester University, Tony Fremont, who kindly agreed to help me and look at some animal bodies. Okay. So we've been running since about 2001 doing that. And
your group has been investigating strange animal deaths, injuries, disappearances, all that kind of thing, and the injuries are of a nature that don't seem to be carried out by normal animal predation. Now, could you just describe, because there's a sort of core group of you, the 3 of you now, mainly in the APFU, isn't there? And you know, you've had some issues over the last sort of year or so. Would you like to expand on that, David?
So that we had some various views and disagreements about who might be doing these mutilations, and the main issue, I guess, was the different viewpoints on the likelihood of human mutilations being done by the same agency who were doing the animal mutilations.
Because some people seem quite happy to, you know, postulate about strange things happening to animals, but as soon as it gets a little bit closer to home, it's suggested that they're doing it to human beings. It's a whole new ball game, isn't it, David?
It certainly is, because the whole level of fright and fear, I guess, changes dramatically.
Yes.
It's one thing for a beast of the field who we raise to kill and eat, being killed strangely, and these mutilations taking place, which people can sort of live with that. Although a lot of people don't like it.
Yes.
I've found in ufology, particularly people in crop circles studies, who find it objectionable. But the human side is more of a problem.
Yes, and that is something that certainly Phil and Mike, who are members of the APFU, would probably disagree with you on. They don't think it's a human phenomenon. They believe that the evidence that has been presented so far is perhaps shaky, they would say. And I do want to get them on the show to put their case.
Yeah,
so that would be, you know, just to see where they're coming from on that. Yeah. Well, we will talk about the human mutilation phenomena later on in this show.
Yes, fine. Yeah.
Okay, and if we talk about the evidence itself, what are the characteristic traits, David, just briefly before we move on to some cases?
Well, they're always pretty much the same. Often there's no blood, or the blood is being changed in the carcass, and there's usually very little evidence of it. There's certainly not blood all around the wounds and on the ground, and none of the animal owners has ever found any. So the blood basically is missing or has been changed in some way and then removed. And then you get the various wounds and injuries starting at the head end. The most common thing is a strip to the jaw, usually usually left side. More often than not. Why that is, I have no idea. And it's stripped clean right to the very bone, and the edges of the cuts around the flesh and the skin of the animal is very neat and tidy. Sometimes it extends around to the snout. The teeth never seem to be touched. The other next organ is the tongue, and often the tongue is completely missing, or right from the back of the root, or there's a strip maybe 2 or 3 centimetres from the tip end, but cut sort of diagonally. And then you will find an eye cleanly removed, or both eyes. One of the ears usually, and again usually the left, or sometimes both ears, and often cropped right down to the scalp. And then you'll find holes in the body, and a lot of organs removed, quite small holes in some cases. The animal, in fact, is devoid of any organs entirely in some cases. Limbs are removed sometimes, a tail, very cleanly docked, and through the joints in the bone. And sometimes there's a complete decapitation, and again, cleanly through the IV joint in the spine. With no mess, And then at the back end you'll find genitals cleanly removed.
So essentially, they show procedures which are not carried out with normal animal predation. That's
no, certainly not.
Yes.
No.
Okay. And just to go through briefly some of the alleged or the proposed explanations that people give, that it is a satanic cult or a secret military project. How would you answer those claims, David?
Well, the cults, the people who have these sort of ceremonies, you know, they tend to go for fowl, to sacrifice birds and cut the head off. They wouldn't go normally for a four-legged animal, and they've been quoted on that when they've been challenged by organisations like in America. And again, if they were doing it, it would make no sense to steal a carcass, an animal should say. You've got to catch it first, which is very difficult in the field. I mean, the farmers have trouble to corner an animal to give it some treatment, even with the help of the farm dogs.
And one thing I find particularly interesting is the fact that nobody's ever been caught, no human being has ever been caught or seen perpetrating these incidents. And there's an item in one of Timothy Good's books, Unearthly Disclosure, I think it is, where he describes, I think it's a cow or a bull, that is actually a farmer witnesses something happening to the animal, and it's being dragged backwards by some kind of invisible force field over a distance, and you can't see what's actually pulling the animal, and you can hear a very faint sort of electrical humming sound, and then the following day he finds this cow mutilated with the classic mutilation injuries. And you know, you think, well, it's some kind of extreme covert operation in that whatever's doing it is perhaps even invisible or able to make their craft invisible, or whatever is carrying it out.
Yes. And there are other cases where farmers have staked fields out, on 2 occasions we know about, with shotguns, hoping to catch the perpetrator who's doing it. And they've not seen anything, and you know, in the night, daylight comes, and then 100 yards or so in front of them, there's another dead lamb or sheep lying there with the mutilations, and they haven't seen a thing.
And if we just move on to the fact that there has been some recent cases in the UK, one in Manchester, or near Manchester, I believe, last year, and somebody sent me an email, a picture of a sheep, mutilated sheep, with a classic jaw strip injury. Would you care to elaborate on that one, David? Because I sent you the information on that. Well,
again, it's a superb shot, taken on a camera phone, but very good quality, and the jaw strip is absolutely classic. It looks as though the mouth is slightly open, so the tongue might be in place, and there was some injury again at the back end, which the 2 guys who were out walking near Watergrove Reservoir, which is near Wardle in Lancashire, so it's just sort of on the Lancashire border in Greater Manchester, thought that the hole at the back was similar to one of the cases we show in Silent Killers.
Right.
They didn't know who the farmer was.
So it was Silent Killers that had alerted this individual to the fact that it might be...
looking at your website, yes.
Yes. And
so that was good.
With regards to the jaw strip injury, I actually showed some pictures of that injury on a CD that I was handing out to various farmers in the Hexham region, and 2 farmers said, oh, well, a badger's done that. That's done by a badger. But you were explaining to me earlier about what a badger is interested in when it finds an animal carcass.
Well, they're like the favourite farmers have said this to me. You know, I'm not an expert on what predators do. This has come from farmers direct, and they don't like the badgers because they're a pest to them, apart from the TB problem. And the badger, they say, have very sharp claws, and they rip the chest open, particularly on lambs, and the heart and the liver is the favourite morsel. So they wouldn't bother chewing around the mouth area with very little meat. You know, there's no virtue in that. And a lady who first reported this sort of jaw strip to me was quite near...
Alison Kirkbride, was it?
No, Alison Hall.
Right, okay.
I'm sorry, it was Hall Farm.
Hall Hill Farm, was it?
Hall Farm, I think Whittenstall, near Consett. and she was an expert, and she dealt with sheep all her life, and even lectured on sheep husbandry at a college in Durham, I think.
Okay.
And she reported this to me, and she said, "I've never seen this in my life before, this jaw strip." And there was other injuries to the ewe, a half-born calf, which was a breech birth. You know, the head gets locked in the vulva, and the ewe mother died. And they went to collect it the following day and found the head was missing on the lamb now, and the ewe had a very peculiar cut of skin and flesh round one of the legs, right from the hock down to the bottom.
Okay, then,
It was
David.
like a sock, it was like an ankle sock.
Yes.
So,
Right.
so
Well,
she dismisses the idea. I mean, if anyone was going to say it was a predator like a badger, it would have been her.
right. Well, we're going to take a short commercial break now, David, and we're going to be talking some more about some more cases, indeed, when we come back. So stay tuned and don't go away.
The RichPlanet Starship is sponsored by Geared4.com online bikes, clothing and accessories. The RichPlanet Starship is sponsored by Geared4.com online bikes, clothing and accessories.
Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking to animal mutilation expert David Cayton, and before the break we were talking about the case near Manchester, which was in fact only 4 miles from Todmorden, which is a very famous UFO hotspot. Where tell us about it, David.
Yes, well, apart from lots of UFO sightings in that area, there's the famous case of ex-PC Alan Godfrey, who had his abduction experience there. But in 2002, responding to one of the Peel adverts in the Farmer's Guardian, a farmer lady rang me from a place called Lumberts, which is sort of a mile from the centre of Todmorden, and this is only 4 miles from the Wardle Reservoir, from the case of October last year.
October 2009.
Yeah. And again, they had a ewe which had the jaw strip, there's some throat damage as well, tongue missing, and one of the ears, and an eye. And then we went to investigate that. A friend, Robert Hulse, came with me and took some movie footage, which is in Silent Killers. And despite them promising to ring me if they found any more, they had in fact 2 other cases within a couple of months, exactly the same. So I found it rather interesting that with just 4 miles distance between the 2 cases, there might be.
So this adds weight to the theory that they're interested in very specific zones in the country.
Yes.
I mean, you can't say that for sure because there's not enough statistical information.
No, there isn't, no.
But if one was to make an assumption based on the evidence that there is, then it is pointing to the fact that they are interested in certain geographical zones.
Yes. Whether that's for convenience, for coming here from wherever
they're coming from,
or there's something else happening in the area which has some bearing on the effect of the quality of the animal or not, is anybody's guess.
And there have been a few cases local to where I live, which is in the northeast, Durham, Northumberland, and one in particular, which was at a place called Prudder, a farm that I went to. I spoke to the farmer, and he gave me some images of a calf, and I think he had 2 calves basically mutilated, where they were cut open from the sort of stomach area, and there was no damage to the head end or the back end. It was all in the central area, but everything had been removed from and it was put down as a black cat in the in the local press.
Common excuse, as you might say.
A common excuse.
And that again is quite close to geographically to
the Whittenstall.
To Whittenstall, yes.
So because of that, I'm aware that there's possibly activity going on in the region where I live. What I did, I produced 50 DVD copies of Silent Killers, and I went to a farming event, basically at the Hexham cattle mart, and I handed it out to 50 farmers who farm in the Hexham region.
Yes.
And this is when some of the farmers were saying, "Oh well, that's actually a badger. A badger's done that injury. The jaw strip was done by a badger." Now, why would a badger nibble away the side of the skin on a sheep? It doesn't make any sense.
No.
But like you say, they have to put it down to something, which
Yes.
is...
And I think it's a case of satisfying themselves as a straightforward reason so they can perhaps sleep in their bed at night, or they like to think they know everything that goes on in the countryside and with animals because they're working with it, they're the expert, and want a pat
It's
answer.
the 4th of March and we've come along to Hexham livestock market where they sell cows and sheep and that kind of thing. When I said calves, I thought there were going to be little things like that. We're at a once-a-year event here where young farmers are, I think they're given grants to purchase a calf sort of 6 months ago, last year, and what they have to do is suckle the calf through the winter and grow it as much as they can, and then they then sell the calves, and the young farmer that actually makes the most money on the calf wins the competition. So we should have, and I think there are over 60 calves that have been purchased and are entering this competition. They're not being sold today, I think they're going to be sold tomorrow. We've brought along 50 copies of Silent Killers to hand out with a message which reads, have you seen any unexplained animal deaths or injuries? Watch this shocking documentary for full information. And it's got my telephone number on here, so we're going to hand these 50 DVDs out to anyone who keeps large amounts of cattle or sheep. These strange injuries. My telephone number's on. I had some good news today because my Member of Parliament Dave Anderson has actually submitted a parliamentary question to the Secretary of State Jim Fitzpatrick, asking him when he's going to reply to Richard D. Hall's correspondence about animal mutilation. My telephone number's on. Okay, right, I've handed out all 50 DVDs of Silent Killers, and it was okay until about the last 5 where I tried to give a copy to the secretary, but I didn't know it was the secretary, and he was asking all these questions, who was backing me, etc, 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 and I should have asked his permission to give people DVDs. So anyway, he let me hand out the remaining ones that I had, so we're going to go to the pub because I'm bloody freezing. And what about other current hotspots, David? I believe Shropshire, Welsh border?
Yes, well, the APFU team, that's mainly Phil and Mike, they've got a name called Operation Corridor, but the corridor's got a bit bigger.
Right.
And they're finding, Phil has laboriously flogged around farms, knocking on doors for a long time, and hitting a few jackpots, and finding farms with incidents.
Okay.
And actually UFOs, strange things in the sky, and other strange experiences. So they're really, really occupied. So for a long time, that southwest of Shropshire of Shrewsbury, sorry, and into the Welsh borders, seems to be a high activity. So
and hopefully, you know, once they finish those investigations, they'll report that, and you know, perhaps we can get them on the show to, you know, to tell everyone, you know, what they think's really going on.
And if people are interested, the APFU have got a website up now. It's still in sort of early days with a few teething problems with it, but there's lots of good information on there about some past cases, and there's clips from silent killers on it, just short bits we've taken from your documentary.
apfu.org for anyone who wants to visit that website, and I would advise you not to be having your tea when you log on. Okay, now I've actually started a little campaign of myself, which you're aware of, whereby I went to see my MP, Dave Anderson, last August, and I sat with him and I handed him a copy of the Silent Killers documentary, and I said, well, there's some definite evidence in this documentary that there's a government cover-up, because you revealed in that documentary that certainly people within DEFRA or MAF at the time appeared to be wanting to cover up and not let the public know, and including the farming media, what is really going on in this country with regards to animal mutilation. So I took that up with my MP, and after, you know, after a couple of months, when he got round to viewing it, he then handed that to the Minister for Agriculture, Jim Fitzpatrick, and that was in December 2009. So I have then sent him a letter, and I've sent him an email. This is Fitzpatrick asking. Actually, he did reply to me, but this was before he'd seen Silent Killers, and he just said that my ministers do not have any information on this subject, and that was it, a blank denial. So that was when my MP's then since then given him a copy of Silent Killers. I don't know whether he's watched it. I've been emailing him, trying to get an answer from the minister, and he hasn't replied. So quite recently, my MP has tabled a PQ, a parliamentary question, to ask when the minister will reply to Richard D. Hall about animal mutilation.
But didn't you first actually approach the Secretary of State, Hilary Benn?
Yes.
Who's Fitzpatrick's boss in a way.
That's right.
And he nominated Fitzpatrick as his man who would be in the know. Is that
yes.
right?
Well, so, I don't know whether Hilary Benn nominated Fitzpatrick. I think I did send a copy of Silent Killers to Hilary Benn, and the reply, the initial reply came from Fitzpatrick, but there was no indication that he'd watched the DVD or been handed the DVD, which is why Dave Anderson then handed him the DVD. But I think Fitzpatrick's area is farm animals, which is probably why it's been handed to him. But my guess is that they're not going to be in office in a couple of months' time.
Yes, so they're probably stalling deliberately.
Maybe.
Before they reply.
Perhaps we should be badgering the Conservative shadow.
The incoming man, yes, whoever he may be. Well,
but
good luck for that. Well done.
Yeah, but you know, when we get an answer to the parliamentary question, or if Jim Fitzpatrick actually replies to me in detail, you know, obviously I will publicise whatever he says, and he's quite welcome to come on this show if he would like to and discuss why DEFRA cover up incidents of animal mutilation in the UK, because it's a real phenomenon. The evidence is there.
I mean, the farmers themselves are unhappy that they're not getting information from what's going on. I mean, some of them, if they just get the odd one, write it off as a predator or just bury it, get rid of the carcass. But a lot of them are not getting the information. Now they're from the farming press, like the Farmers Weekly, Farmers Guardian, and editorial people there in the past, having seen my appeal advert, I thought, oh, story here. And then they cobble something together, and then suddenly it's rejected and blocked. So they're not supporting the farming community through the farming media, are they?
Yes, and we can postulate as to how a cover-up may be being orchestrated, because I've heard it said that every local authority has somebody within that local authority whose job it is to keep an eye out for such incidents and alert DEFRA or a unit within DEFRA. Yeah. Is that right, David?
Yes.
Have you heard that?
Yes, that's true. Yes. Mike Freebury.
Mike Freebury told you that?
Yeah. Well, he had a problem because he picks up two sheep from Dartmoor, and he'd been particularly investigating the Dartmoor incidents, starting off with a pony case from 1977, and found that the sheep mutilations were still ongoing in Dartmoor. And he removed two sheep to a veterinary practice near his home in the West Midlands, and all of a sudden they must have been listening to his mobile phone calls, and instructions came from the health authorities, whatever, to the veterinary practice to not provide any more assistance to Mr. Freebury and the APFU. So they're keeping an eye on us, what we're doing, and trying to impede our work, if you like. And
it is quite possible that Jim Fitzpatrick, the Minister for Farm Animals, does have no knowledge of this.
Yes, I think the whole business is kept in small compartments. And it's the whole need-to-know thing again. And I suspect DEFRA have special units to deal with it. So the body of most of the employees within DEFRA won't have a clue what it's all about.
Yes.
And I think that's the safest way to play it. That's probably what they're doing. Yeah.
And you know, you think there's, I mean, you know, nobody really knows, but do you think there's the intelligence agencies would be involved in that? I mean, there's no hard evidence of it, though, is there?
No, but I suspect there would be.
Yeah.
Someone's pulling strings, and I think the people who are directing all this in America, and the American intelligence agencies have some clout and influence on our UK intelligence agencies and our organisations like DEFRA.
Okay.
To keep the lid on all this as best as they can. I think that's the objective.
And anyone who's witnessed anything, either in the past or recently, we'd love to know about it, because there's a campaign to collect new evidence for this particular phenomenon, isn't there, David?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Okay, right. Well, we're going to go for another commercial break now, so we'll be back soon.
The RichPlanet Starship is sponsored by Geared4.com online bikes, clothing and accessories.
Welcome back on board the Starship, and I'm talking with David Cayton, who has researched the animal mutilation phenomenon for many years. And we mentioned in the first part, David, that possibly this phenomenon extends to human beings. And it's a very disturbing fact, or some would say it's not a fact, some dispute this, it's highly controversial. But the record of possible human body parts or human remains goes back to the 1940s, I believe, when there's alleged UFOs that were recovered contained human body parts.
Yeah, okay, you could argue, and it's fairly reasonable to say, it's sort of hearsay and rumour, but my view is there's no smoke without fire, and these bits of information have sort of leaked out and passed around from A to B by word of mouth, and with all the evidence sort of building up, I think there's a possible case that this is a fact, and there's one particular case which we'll discuss in Brazil from '88, which I think is pretty compelling.
Okay, so if we move forward to the 1950s, there was a case in 1956 of a reported human mutilation at White Sands missile testing range.
Yeah.
You've got any information on that, David?
Well, again, this has come from a gentleman who investigated a Brazilian case of '88, which we'll come to, and he claims he's spoken to intelligence agency persons, one retired and one in post, who were involved in that, and reported that a major and the sergeant Pete Louette were searching down range of the missile testing for a missile that's been returned, or debris or whatever.
Right.
And the major witnessed this craft come down and a sort of coil thing come out, wrap itself around Sergeant Louette and whisked him up screaming into the sky. And he was missing. And when the major got back to base to report this, at first they thought they accused him of murder, and he confessed to killing the sergeant. But I think they only found his body 5 days later, with the same sort of mutilations, like genitals removed, anal core, etc., which was very similar to the animals.
And moving on from that, another rumoured case, again, there's no sort of firm testimony, but it's rumoured that in Vietnam in the 60s, in the Vietnam War, a B-52 bomber was found intact in the jungle, and there's no way it could have landed.
Yeah, it wasn't crashed as though it crashed. It
Yes.
was pretty intact, the aircraft.
Yes.
Yeah, and then they found the crew all dead with the mutilation injuries, on the bodies. And I think their ID tags had been mixed up as well,
Right.
which suggested they'd been removed from the aircraft and put back.
Okay.
So
And do you know if they were clothed?
no, I
You
don't
know.
Don't know.
But okay. But again, there's no hard evidence of this, so
No.
we need to stipulate that.
Yeah.
And moving forward in time again to probably the most prominent human mutilation case and the most controversial is the Garapiranga case in Brazil of 1988. And we've got photographs here. And if you are squeamish and you don't want to see photographs of a dead man, switch off your television now. The first one here is of the whole body. Would you care to comment on that, David?
Yes. Well, these were police photographs actually taken of this, what they thought was a homicide. And they're not very good pictures. The lighting wasn't good.
Yes.
And the second or third generation images. But you'll notice that his stomach area is very dipped, so lots of organs have been found to be removed from small holes in his abdomen, his belly button area. And he had, starting at the head end.
So starting at the head,
Yes.
is what appears to be the classic jaw strip that we have seen in these sheep cases.
Yes, completely round, teeth intact, his tongue had been removed, ears removed, and all the auditory organs into the brain, both eyes,
And we've
and
got the
optical
photograph
organs.
there of the back of the head with a hole.
Yeah.
Is that a hole in the ear there?
Yes, that was just showing one side.
Right.
His ear cropped right close. And then in his arm, he got a small spherical hole, a little bit of blood trickling out, but you'll see the muscle is
So they've actually took the muscle tissue.
the muscle's being sort of removed through this small hole. Yep.
So-
There's little holes in his cranium as well, so they think brain samples have been taken.
Right.
So
very small holes, which are clearly not done by predator because of the sort of uniform, almost teardrop shape holes.
Yeah.
So that it's not been done by an animal, and it clearly does look as though organs have been removed from the body through small holes, which is what happens in the animal mutilation
yes,
cases.
that's right. Yeah.
And then finally we've got the classic rectal core.
Yeah.
And it's not very pleasant, I'm sure. But this is probably the best evidence. Would you agree? These
absolutely,
photographs, along with the report.
Yes, there was a report by Mr. Shellhorn, who went to Brazil and interviewed some of the leading Brazilian ufologists. And two of the ufologists came upon this accidentally, well, intentionally, because a relative, the police photographer that took the images, was a cousin to, I think it was Dr. Ruben Goes, who was one of the investigators in UFOs, and he had a clue that this was significant and similar to the animals, and these two ufologists, Goa and Garcia, went to interview the two police medical doctors who carried out the post-mortem, and got a copy of that. And then they showed these two medical doctors copies of some of the animal mutilation pictures, and they all had to agree, well, they agreed quite easily that they were very, very similar.
Right.
Precision cuts and surgical procedures, basically.
Well, yes, and when I was researching the information for Silent Killers, I interviewed Linda Moulton Howe, who has investigated the animal mutilation phenomenon in America. Yeah. And we did discuss that, and she's of the opinion that humans are not at risk from this phenomenon, and I've got an audio clip of what she had to say.
I do not think that whatever we're dealing with wants to appear to humans as being interested in killing and mutilating humans. They don't. There's no hard forensic evidence that is the case.
There was one case, I believe, in Brazil where there was a jaw strip and all the other signs of mutilation.
Oh, you're talking about the photos that Gavard presented in Nevada in the early 90s and enrages me. He had not one shred of evidence beyond the photograph. The photographs were sent to me because he never had the courtesy to even contact me, to even ask me what I thought of the photographs, but used my name in the presentation as this is like the animal mutilations that Linda Moulton Howe has investigated. Untrue and absolutely unprofessional and the wrong way to present anything to an audience when he has done no research of what I call research.
Okay.
And let me give you the backstory. So somebody tells me that this man from Brazil has done this and sends me those photographs. And I take the photographs to a medical doctor. I did not set up anything. I just put the photos down in front of a medical doctor and said, if you had a victim in front of you like this, what would you conclude? Without missing a beat, the medical doctor said, oh, I saw a lot of that in Vietnam. I said, what do you mean? He said, that's what Agent Orange does to human tissue or any tissue. I said, well, what do you mean Agent Orange does this? He said, in Vietnam, we always had, because he worked in a medvac team in Vietnam, he said, we were always spraying Agent Orange, and we were always seeing animals and humans that had these deep penetration holes surrounded by the black carbon ring because we're a carbon life form, and Agent Orange always leaves black circles around penetrating wounds in flesh because we're a carbon-based life form, and that's what Agent Orange does.
Okay.
And everything on those photos could be explained as a revenge murder using Agent Orange.
Okay, then what do you think of that then, David? These images show Agent Orange.
Well, I just looked up Agent Orange on the internet, and it doesn't seem to, the chemical that we're using doesn't seem to cause these sort of injuries. You get, skin damage and sort of superficial skin burn, but not at depth, and certainly would cut neat holes and extract large body organs through those holes. And it affects the people who get deformities and limb deformities, and their offspring, when they have children, are also deformed. It's those more long-term effects, in fact, from what I have read. So, and I would like to just point out that Professor Tony Fremont, when he came to my house with Tony Dodd, after he said he'd agree with me, we wanted to show him animal pictures, and Tony Dodd brought these images, and Professor Fremont looked at these and said, I don't see how we can do this, and he was talking about the role we, the medical profession.
And he's a professor of pathology.
Yes, in human pathology, not animals. So,
yes.
Okay, he may not have been au fait with all the effects of Agent Orange, but I'm pretty sure he realised this was more than superficial attack from some chemical on the outer body.
Okay. Now, moving closer to home, David, there is anecdotal evidence that this has occurred in the UK, is there not?
Yes. Yeah.
And Tony Dodd has covered it in his book, Alien Investigator, the incident at Dalby Forest. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, only what Tony told me about some years ago.
Tony Dodd was a serving police sergeant, I think?
Yeah, he was a sergeant, yeah. And even though he'd retired from the force, he was getting information from various people, which he wouldn't obviously disclose who they were. And he said up in North Yorkshire, near Pickering, there's a big forest area. In fact, there's a forest ride. You can do a circular tour. And he said in one particular field, 7 human bodies were all found within a space of about a week, 10 days, something like that. I don't know if it was 1 at a time or 2 at a time. I don't know that detail, and Tony didn't either.
These were naked?
Naked bodies, and they had these classic similar wounds.
Right.
And all the bodily hair was also removed, not just the hair in the genital areas, but in the arms, all the bodily hair was totally missing.
This was the late 80s, early 90s, that sort of time?
Yes, I think so, yes, yeah.
Okay, and when I first put Silent Killers out, a gentleman watched the film and contacted me and said, why on earth are you making a film about animal mutilation when human mutilation is far more important? I know all about it. I gave Tony Dodd a whole load of information that I'd uncovered. And the gentleman I then said to him, well, okay, well, I'd like to interview you if you know about cases of human mutilation
Definitely.
in the UK.
Yeah.
And I've kind of offered to interview him several times. I even went down to South Wales where he lives, so he will know who I am. And if you're listening, you know, the offer's still there. You can come into the studio and tell us what you know about human mutilation in the Brecon Beacon area. Because that particular case, he was allegedly shown photographs by somebody in a special unit of the SAS. The photographs were so shocking that he then went to the police. In 1997, this gentleman had apparently put a poster up in the Brecon Beacon area asking people if they'd witnessed any UFOs, and he was contacted by this ex-SAS soldier, who then showed him photographs of cases that he had been employed to cover up in the special unit that he was employed in. The name of that unit, I believe, was called Group 58 Security. So anyone who has any information on this alleged secret SAS group, we'd love to hear from you. And the email address is starship@richplanet.net. Okay, and it is believed or rumoured, again, it's more rumours, that Margaret Thatcher was told by Reagan to set up this group.
Yeah,
You heard that one, David?
That's what I'd heard, yes. That they had this special relationship. Encouraged Margaret Thatcher to do that in the UK, because whether they already knew there'd been UK ones or it was just an in case, so they're ready and prepared to deal with the contingency, I don't know.
And just to talk about, you know, the broad picture, because people will be saying, well, why are they doing this? What is their program? Why animals? Why humans? Why, you know, what can we say? What do we know that we can say of the motives?
Well, that's the big question.
That is the big question.
Why are they doing it? And why do they need these organs and blood, etc.? I think it's all to do with human DNA and the progression and tinkering with human beings who probably put us here in the first place. And we are sort of a program. I don't know, it might be for their survival, for themselves.
There is the theory that they're effectively using these animals as incubators or factories to generate, whether it be you know, some kind of antibody or something that they're growing inside them that they then take and extract from the blood. And possibly, you know, we hope to bring out some information on that, but it's sort of ongoing research, isn't it, David?
But I mean, this is happening to all life forms, and sea mammals, for example, birds, even mice, not just bovine animals, obviously sheep and what have you. So it's hard to accept that if there is some sort of disease or problem they are growing something, why would they do it in all their life forms? And
if you believe the abduction program is going on, i.e. human beings are being taken without their knowledge, their memories are erased, and what abductees generally report is that the ETs have a hybridization program, so that they're creating some kind of, whether they're hybridizing, making, you know, adding DNA to humans or taking human DNA to aliens, but perhaps it's linked to that in some way. Perhaps they need they're growing antibodies that they then need to protect their hybrids, or, you know, perhaps it's linked.
Yeah, well, certainly one abductee, after hypnosis, is reported to have found himself in a craft or something, in a room anyway, and close by was a cow. And this poor person observed this cow attached to all sorts of tubes and things, and obviously these sort of mutilations going on, and was reassured telepathically that don't worry, this isn't going to happen to you.
Right.
So that they were a bit insensitive in that case to have the animal being worked on in close proximity to the human being.
Yes, and medical experts that have looked at mutilated bovines claim that it's possibly being done while the animal is alive. That you know, the blood is extracted while the animal's alive, and the incisions are cut into the animal while it's still alive, and perhaps this poor chap here, you know, was still alive while that was happening to him.
I hope not, but it's possible. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, on that note, David, I'd like to thank you for coming in again onto the Starship.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And
Thank you
we'll get you beamed back down to Manchester.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Good night.
Carried out by normal
No.
animal predation. Now,
No,
could you just describe, because there's a sort of core group of you, the three of you now, mainly in the APFU, isn't it? And you know, you've had some issues over the last sort of year or so. Would you like to expand on that, David? Mm-hmm.
So that we had some various views and disagreements about who might be doing these mutilations, and the main issue, I guess, was the different viewpoints on the likelihood of human mutilations being done by the same agency who were doing the animal mutilations.
Because some people seem quite happy to, you know, postulate about strange things happening to animals, but as soon as it gets a little bit closer to home, it's suggested that they're doing it to human beings. It's a whole new ball game, isn't it, David?
It certainly is, because
subject.
The whole level of fright and fear, I guess,
Yes.
changes dramatically.
Yes.
It's one thing for a beast of the field who we raise to kill and eat being killed strangely, and these mutilations taking place, which people can sort of live with that. Although a lot of people don't like it.
Yes.
I've found in ufology, particularly people in crop circles studies, who find it objectionable. But the human side is more of a problem.
Yes, and that is something that certainly Phil and Mike, who are members of the APFU, would probably disagree with you on. They don't think it's a human phenomenon. They believe that the evidence that has been presented so far is... And viewers may already know about the film Silent Killers that we made in May 2009.
I do hope so.
An hour-long documentary which charts a lot of David's and members of the APFU's work into the very strange animal mutilation phenomenon.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mentioned the APFU there, David. Would you like to just tell us a bit about the APFU? What does that stand for and what's it all about?
Well, it's a name that one of the members, Phil Hoyle, actually coined. We had kicked some ideas around. There was 3 or 4 of us, no, 5 originally, people we got together after I'd been looking at the mutes on my own for 3 or 4 years, and got Phil interested because he'd seen something in UFO magazine, Quest UFO magazine, and we decided to pool our efforts, and Phil saw connections with the work he was doing with abductions possibly. So he decided his best name was Animal Pathology Field Unit, and we chose that because of the pathology umbrella, because we had I had a professor of pathology in Manchester University, Tony Fremont, who kindly agreed to help me and look at some animal bodies. Okay. So we've been running since about 2001 doing that. And
so your group has been investigating strange animal deaths, injuries, disappearances, all that kind of thing, and the injuries are of a nature that don't seem to be Welcome on board the RichPlanet Starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall. In tonight's show, we will be discussing a very disturbing phenomenon, that of animal mutilation, and the controversial subject of human mutilation. The show was recorded in March 2010 and was the first Starship show produced. so there are one or two technical problems, mainly the fact that one of the cameras wasn't working. Nevertheless, this hopefully will not detract too much from the show. We believe from evidence which has been uncovered over the last decade that there has been a government cover-up from the highest levels on this issue for quite some time. DEFRA, that's the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, have an efficient strategy in place involving the monitoring of vets, farms and members of the public. We believe from information given to us by witnesses that DEFRA have agents within animal health positions throughout the country who have a secret dual role unbeknown to the local authorities and high numbers. The cuts start at the left side of the lower chin and work rearwards with a peeling action. Considerable cutting force is applied without interruption. Seal blubber is very tough and the cuts were made with no jagged edges or breaks. An RSPCA vet in Norfolk has done post-mortems on 12 seals, and one post-mortem has been done by the VLA in Bury St Edmunds. The RSPCA vet said the cuts looked like they had been caused by some kind of machinery with great force, and also that the seals were in perfect health before the mutilation wounds were inflicted. So far, the authorities are baffled and do not have an explanation. I hope to bring you a report on these cases in the near future as more information is uncovered. In tonight's show, I talk to David Cayton about the bizarre mystery of animal mutilation. David was a photographer in the RAF for 10 years, then worked for British Aerospace for 28 years, rising to become the head of the non-destructive testing division. Since retiring, he has spent 13 years investigating strange animal deaths and spoke to me on the Starship in March about his research. Well, it's good to have you back on board the ship, David.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Okay.
It's good to be beamed up again.
Good.
I'm enjoying it more this time. I got a bit vertigo last time.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'll have to have a word with the technicians then. Okay, so you've come along today, David, to talk about the animal mutilation phenomenon in vets. These agents are used to report any suspected animal mutilation cases to a central DEFRA-controlled outfit. DEFRA agents then swiftly remove any evidence before it can be examined by independent researchers. Throughout this show, we will be screening some images of mutilated animals and some of a human being. If you are sensitive to this kind of thing, please switch off now. We realize that this show is sometimes broadcast when people are eating their breakfast. We recommend that these people hurry up and finish your cornflakes to avoid any trepidation. Having said that, we have limited the selection of images to a mere fraction of those in our possession and chosen just a few to demonstrate important aspects of the phenomenon. Just in the last few weeks, there have been cases of mutilated seals turning up on the shores of the UK. Since late 2008, a total of 52 mutilated seals have been found along the east coast, from St Andrews Bay in Scotland down to the North Norfolk coast. The injuries on some of the seals is bizarre to say the least. Some have had corkscrew-shaped deep cuts along the length of their bodies. The consensus of opinion among experts, including Dr. Dave Thompson of the Sea Mammals Research Unit, is that boat propellers are not the cause of the injuries, as there has been no bone damage. Also, seals are shy creatures, and it is rare for them to be killed by boat propellers, certainly not in such